Welcome back into the All Things Mizzou podcast presented by Missouri Tigers and NSI on KC Sports Network. Joey Van Zummeren here with Michael Stamps and Killian Wright here today to talk Missouri football. We had an interesting challenge today. We did this last offseason as well of ranking every position group on Missouri's roster. This was, again, an interesting and difficult challenge, one that I think was a lot more difficult than it was last year. So excited to get into this. I guess any thoughts to add on if this was an interesting challenge? Anything you learned about yourself, the roster through this process, Michael or Killian?
It absolutely was hard, and I wouldn't be shocked if while we're talking, I switch up what I have written down just because something else comes to my head or a last second change of thought. I feel like I'm going to have to be more ready to defend myself than I probably thought I was.
Yeah, I think I just learned that I was like super indecisive, which I already knew that, but like I switched my list a bunch and I still don't feel very good about it, but I'm going to stick with it how it is now. And there's probably going to be a moment where it's like one of you guys says something that convinces me like, oh, maybe my pick should be different. And then the other one says something that's like the total opposite. And I was like, oh, maybe my pick should be that. But I'll stick by my guns and not change my list as we go through it. And I'm interested to see what like the biggest position discrepancy we have, but I guess we can figure that out after we all say it.
For sure. Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if like one of us has one at 8 that the other one has like as one of the last two, to be honest. Maybe not that dramatic, but like after spot 4, it gets like really muddy for me, to be honest.
That's exactly what the line was. Yeah.
I didn't feel good about any of it, honestly.
There's a lot of just predicting as well. So I kind of went with a little mix of like my prediction mixed with like maybe realistic expectation. So we'll see how that goes. I think the number one spot is the one I feel most confident in, and I wouldn't be surprised if we all have the same one. Does anyone have anything besides running back?
No.
Okay. It's running back. Yeah.
That's a slight relief, honestly.
Yeah. We're filming this on May 19th. Maybe there's more updates out on Ahmad Hardy by the time this podcast episode is out. I'm putting this on with the assumption that Ahmad Hardy will be available for at least most of the 2026 season. If he's not, I would maybe still have running back at least still in the top 3 with Jamal Roberts and Zyshawn Edwards. Anything to add there, fellas?
Yeah, I think the depth matters a lot too, because like you said, I think for me, even if Hardy was out, I think I would have them at, I'm looking at my list right now, it'd be 3 at the lowest. Between Roberts like being like a top 7 running back-ish in the SEC, and then like Edwards looking awesome last year, and even like Fanotti looks pretty cool. I think that it's like undeniably really high. And then if Hardy's healthy, 1.
I might be willing to put them a little bit lower if there's no Ahmad Hardy, just because, Zyshawn Edwards had a pretty awesome season last year, but it was at an FCS school, and Fanotti was kind of like average production at a FCS school. We have Maxwell Warner too, but we don't really know what he brings to the table. So I'd be willing to probably put them a little bit lower than 3, but still, I mean, probably for me, top like no lower than 5 would be my floor if there's no Ahmad Hardy. But again, obviously, if he's available, he's number 1, or they're number 1.
For sure. All right, on to number 2. I feel like this, I don't know. This one might be pretty similar. I'll throw it to you guys first. Killian, what do you have at 2?
I've got linebackers. What do you guys have?
Same here. I have linebacker.
Okay.
I did not have linebacker.
Okay. I guess I'll say why I had linebacker then. I think I think linebacker has the most prior production of any group on the defense. And then just like, I think Rodriguez and Woodyard are like as close to a sure thing as you can get as like high end starters, or even like as like a floor. Like I would be shocked if they are not at least average. And I don't think I can say that about multiple starters at any other position on the team. So with Rodriguez looking really strong to end last year, and then Woodyard just being really good the entire year last year, I think it's a really strong unit on the defense. And then even the depth, like Jeremiah Beasley, like could get better. Dante McClellan has been a guy that like you got to keep an eye on. And then obviously you're like, well, we'll see, potentially adding JJ Bush to the unit, who is a really high ranked freshman. And they've just done like a pretty good job at like consistently kind of producing these guys who just slowly get better and better. And then with the high end talent, I think it's kind of hard, especially for a defensive group, to have guys that are like proven producers and then not pick that as like one of the best units, at least for me. So that's kind of why I had them as my two. But yeah, Joey, and if you agree with that, then yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's mainly I'm confident. I think you know what you're getting in both Woodyard and Rodriguez. And I think there's so much more potential for Rodriguez to go. I think there's Jeremiah Beasley, I've been hopeful in since he came into the program. Dante McClellan had a solid freshman season, showed a lot of promise. So I'm confident in the group and what I know they have, and I'm hopeful for what they could be too. I'm interested in what, Michael, do you have?
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys. I feel like I had kind of a similar reasoning-ish. I rolled with the safeties. I love Santana Banner, and I know we kind of threw his name around last week when we did superlatives for kind of that defensive player of the year / most improved category. I think if that's the case, then you're looking at one of the better defensive backs maybe in the entire conference. I think Trajan Greco is a guy who's been like just begging to get more playing time and break out. And he's just been kind of this like steady backup, like third, fourth option in that position group for a while. And I think he's going to have to more than likely play more. And then obviously you bring in Kensley Lewis-Austin and Elijah Dotson, both guys who I think will contribute right away. And I think maybe there's a question around Elijah Dotson just being so young, but he was productive as a true freshman at Michigan. So I don't know. I have a pretty strong inkling that that's going to translate pretty well. And same thing with Kensley. He was productive last year. So those are two of, arguably the best additions in the portal class in one position group. And then you have guys on the back end like CJ Bass might be a guy who can contribute a little bit. If you're talking about true freshmen who could contribute, Jaden McGregory, I think is a guy we threw around. I think it was you, Joey, last week for that freshman of the year conversation. So that could absolutely be a guy who contributes right away. So I think it's a really, really deep position group. I think Santana Banner will absolutely be one of the best players in the defense. And I think one of Leward or Fawson or Dotson or both will be instant contributors. And then again, there's depth behind it. So I agree with you guys in the linebacker position. And I have them very, very close after this. So I think we were kind of on the same wavelengths, but I really, really like this position group. And maybe, I don't know. Maybe I like the players individually more than the linebacker room, just as players and what they bring to the table. But I think it's a really good position group. I think Santana Banner, a mix of the transfers, and then Greco on the top end is really, really good.
I'd agree with you there. And so you had mentioned at the top that you wouldn't be surprised if we're changing the way. So the more you were talking and the more I heard you, I was like, yeah, I moved safeties up from 5 to 3 while you're talking. So I have safeties at my next spot. Like you mentioned, I think Elijah Dotson is one of their most promising transfers with both Banner and Lewis-Austin. Both of them have SEC starting experience. So no doubt that they'll be able to step in those roles. Killian, what do you have at 3?
Well, Joey, I also have my safeties at 5, but I'm going to stick by my list. I'll make sure but at my 3, I had wide receivers. Between Caden Lee doing what he did last year is not the top option at Ole Miss, and then I would imagine that number gets a little better. Obviously, he's going to have a different quarterback. For the most part, he's worked with Simmons before, but obviously last year Chambliss was the main guy. I think Lee coming over could kind of creep up to that 800-ish, maybe even 9 mark. And then Alubade would be shocked if we don't see improvement from him. I don't know how much of an improvement we're going to get, if he's going to be a guy that like all of a sudden leaps up to like that 800-900 mark, or if he's more like the 600 mark. Either way, like I think Alubade and Lee is like a really capable, whichever way it ends up being, really capable 1-2 in the SEC. And then Goody has been a 3 for like multiple seasons now and has been quality at it. Like with Sorsby last year, he was quality. He's a nice field spacer. I think you really know what you're getting with your top three. And I think to me, with a roster that's like so many unknowns at a lot of positions, like I'm ranking the positions that I know what I'm getting from higher. And like, obviously I don't know, like I just said, I don't know exactly what we're going to get from Donovan Olubade, whether he turns into one of the best receivers in the conference or if he's just like keeps on steadily growing. I don't know which one of those we're going to get. But between Lee, Olubade, and Goody, I think that's a really quality top three to have personally. And then even the depth, like some of those guys like Sean Terry could be really good. I know Drink has talked about him. He could be a contributor this year. Like Nashawn Montgomery is a pretty freak athlete. Like I think he could be someone who has some fun stuff going on. And then like Devion Hill-Lomax is like 6'4". He's listed at 6'5" some places. I think he's 6'4". Like that's like a jump guy to have. But I think that's why I'm going with my receivers so high, is because I feel safe in what I'm getting with the group.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not going to explain too much. I have the linebackers at 3. I think I was on the similar wavelength with you. I just am pretty high on the safeties, but yeah, I completely agree with everything you guys said. I think Woodyard and Rodriguez are surefire things. I think they're going to be excellent together. I'm a fan of Beasley, fan of Dante McClellan. I think it's kind of fun that guys like Brian Huff have stuck around. He's been here for a little while, and he's I don't know if he's just waiting his turn or really likes it here or what, but he was a good recruit and is a guy who could maybe contribute on the back end or just more special team stuff. And then you bring in 2 good freshmen with Keenan Harris and JJ Bush. Like you said, we don't really know what the case is with JJ Bush, but that could be a guy who helps out as well. So I think you've got a really deep group all around. I don't need to add too much to them. It's a good group.
All right. We said 4 is where it got pretty muddy for us. So I'm interested to see what we got here. So this is definitely where I was talking of like, there's no way, like you really have to kind of make a prediction on some of these guys as far as where you place them. And it makes sense, Killian, why you said you kind of really valued the kind of certainty in some of these groups because of that. But I put quarterbacks here with my prediction. I think this, like, I mean, not that football is categorized by like what position ranking you are as far as the roster, but like I think this should be the bar for quarterbacks. Like if they're the 4th best position group on the roster, they're probably at a good spot. I mean, it's really just Austin Simmons, but I do consider the depth here as well, especially with Nick Evers as your backup. I like that, and I'm predicting him to be a good FCC starting quarterback. So I have quarterbacks there. What do you have, Killian?
I went with offensive line, which I think for the most part, it's a little contradictory because like you don't really know what you're going to get in Josh Atkins. And then he's also having like the injury, but like they're returning an all conference guy in Caden Green. Like he's a top 3 player on the team, like maybe the 2nd best player on the team. Like he's up there, and he's going to be playing one of the most important positions on the team at left tackle. So like, I find it kind of hard. And then also with like Drink and Brandon Jones' ability to just like kind of consistently usually make whoever's out there pretty solid. And then a lot of the guys are returning who maybe weren't as great last year, like Peagler and Judice. If you want to say they were the weak links of last season's team, I have faith that they're going to get better in year 2, just because a lot of, and obviously Peagler's not a transfer, but it'll be his 2nd year starting, should he start. They're getting a 2nd year in the Mizzou system. And then some of the transfers, like I really like Zach Owens. I think Zach Owens is going to be really good next year. I don't know about like all conference level or anything, but I think he's going to be very good. And then Josh Atkins, if he can put it together. If not, you have some solid depth. Like you can turn to Luke Work. Even some of the guys like toward the end of the younger guys like Jack Lange and Johnny Jones are like freak athletes as like the younger tackles. So I think there's quality depth to go around too. Tristan Wilson is a pretty solid backup. But yeah, I have my offensive line high just because like they have one of the best players on the team at one of the most important positions. So I guess it's kind of similar to what you're saying, Joe. If you think Austin Simmons is going to be one of the better players at one of the most important position, I guess that's kind of my reasoning, is I'm top heavy going with it for Caden Green. And then I'm also just having faith in the coaching staff, keeping a unit good that has been good.
I like that reasoning a lot, Killian. I'm going with with the receivers at 4. I think Lee and Alubade is a pretty exciting and intriguing 1-2 punch there. And then just down the line with the depth, with Goody, he's ridiculously fast. That's a good guy to have. You have Montgomery, who's an insane athlete. I just think the deeper you go, whether there's injuries or someone doesn't live up to the potential you were kind of thinking of, there's going to be someone who can step in. Fulks and Sean Terry are exciting players, and we maybe saw small glimpses of what they can do. And I think those are 2 guys who could maybe step into bigger roles. And then with Brady and Hill Lomax, you obviously don't know entirely what you're getting with them too, but seems like guys who could maybe come in and catch a few passes. So. And there's Lanier from Minnesota too, who seems kind of like a gigantic question mark, but he was a high rated recruit. So there's obviously something there, at least athletically. So I think if there's injuries or if someone just isn't giving you what you thought, there's going to be someone else who's able to step in. So depth wise, I really like this group. And then with the fact that it's not just one player at the top of the position group, that might be one of the best players on the team. The fact that you have Lee and Alubade, who might be top 10, 15 players on the team, I think that's reason enough to put it into the top 4. So I'll go receivers at 4. I just want to throw on the record that I think 4 through 6 were like the hardest. I know we kind of talked about it, but 4 through 6 for me might all be interchangeable. It kind of sounds like we all have the same reasoning in the same maybe 2 or 3 positions in the 4 to 6 range. So I think this has been pretty interesting. But yeah, this was the hardest part for me to pick, and I think I could probably interchange it based on everything everyone said so far.
Absolutely agree. All right, so be interesting to hear kind of our middle of the group here, and we'll get to that right after this break.
Heather Luce, broker owner, KC Local Homes, and Emprise Bank has been a great partner for us. They're our partner in Possible. Debbie and I hit it off immediately, and she was one of the first bankers that I would say sat down with me and actually genuinely cared about my story and where I was coming from and what I was trying to do, not just what kind of loan do you need, how much equity do you have, and she really kind of laid out my options for me and just made the process make sense, and I felt comfortable with it. Start to talk about it and think about it, a building popped up that I wanted, that I could afford, and it was in a great area. And so they really guided me through the SBA. I used the SBA loan to acquire it and really guided me through that process and made it happen. I think that we talk about that a lot, where we wouldn't have a business. We wouldn't have what we have here if we didn't have the clientele that we do. I've always functioned out of a people over profits mentality. The houses sell themselves, right? I'm here to help people and facilitate the transaction for them.
All right, getting back into it at spot number 5. I went with the wide receivers here. Like you guys both had higher, really Caden Lee and Donovan Alubade carrying that. But like you mentioned, Michael, too, there's, I don't know if there's as much maybe proven depth almost, but the depth there is at least interesting between Lanier and then Nashawn Montgomery as well. So interested to see kind of how that group shakes out. I mean, Sean Terry as well thrown into that group. Killian, what do you have at number 5?
So I've got safeties here, and I think the reason I have them a little lower, like Michael, I know you had your safeties at your 2. I really like the safety group. I think I'm kind of equating it to if I'm comparing it to my linebacker group, for example, if you want to say Banner and Woodyard are somewhat equivalent because they were both basically full-time starters last year. Banner was really high in the snap count for the season total. I think there's not necessarily a Rodriguez in the safety group. I like Trajan Gecko, and I like Luador. He's more of a slot guy, but if we're counting that for the safeties, then sure. And then Dotson is a not too experienced. He played last year, not a whole lot. He's also coming off that torn labrum, but I think there's quality depth to go around. I just think there's a little more question marks in the group, which is just kind of the pattern of my list. There's more question marks the further you go down. I really like Banner, and I'd be shocked if one of the bunch of Luador or Greco or McGregory like doesn't step up, or even CJ Bass, like if one of those guys at least doesn't step up and is like a quality starter, I'd be somewhat surprised, but I don't know who it's going to be. And there's a chance that more of them don't work out than more of them do, I think. So, yeah, I think that's why they're a little lower on me. And I think Santana Banner's good. I don't necessarily know if he's like top defensive back in the SEC good, but I think he's good. I just don't think he's like a superstar.
I think part of the intrigue with me with the safeties is like breakout potential. I think there's absolutely a lot more of that there than in the linebacker room, which maybe isn't the best thing to rank it on, but I think the upside this season for the safeties is pretty darn high, that there's got to be someone on that kind of, like you said, Killian, on that back end who can step up. So definitely an interesting comparison there. My 5 was the quarterbacks. Similar kind of reasoning for you, Joey. I think only reason I had him a step below just is because Simmons hasn't really been a long-term starter yet. He has a few, he's sprinkled in good performances here and there, but hasn't fully been able to string together like a full season, which is, I guess, kind of important if you want to be a starting quarterback in the SEC. So obviously he has the glimpses, and I think it's pretty clear that he's super talented, but just maybe the lack of I don't want to say lack of production, because that's kind of unfair, but just some of the playing experience. But again, it's pretty clear that he's a great player. Then down the line, I think it's nice that you have a young guy in Zollers who can step up and play if he has to. I guess we don't really know what his plan is. He might maybe take the red shirt, but still we kind of got a taste of Matt Zollers last year. That's a guy who down the road could be pretty good. And then Nick Evers is kind of the opposite, very experienced, a lot of starting, not necessarily starting experience a little bit, but he's been at a lot of different stops and things like that. So I think you have a good mixture of experience and potential and talent there down the line. I mean, there's Sedwar too. I doubt he's going to do anything this year, but I think he's got some. He's a talented guy as well. So it's a deep-ish room. I think you have options if Austin Simmons were to go down, but I think there's not the same starting experience or ton of production in some of the other position groups for me to put on higher.
For sure. All right. So we're out of the top 5 now. Just a little rundown of there is 4 positions that we all have in the top 5: running back, wide receiver, linebacker, safety. There is 3 positions that we have not called all yet: tight end, defensive line, edge, and cornerback. I'm going to take we're at 6 right now. I'm taking wide receiver right here. Or no, I just mentioned that as 5. I'm taking tight end here. I'm taking tight end off the board. I got lost in my chart. Tight end at number 6 for me. This is like the one group, for all that we've talked about, of like the questions. Like, I have 0 question about Missouri's tight end room heading into this season. You know what you're getting out of Brett Norfleet if he stays healthy, of course, which is, just as big of a question as anything. What you're getting: a solid blocker out of Jordan Harris. Jude James was a solid rotational player last year. Still like his potential. Gavin Hoffman, I really love the idea of Gavin Hoffman and his size, but it's not like they're relying on him to have a breakout season there. All 4 of those guys are solid. They would be higher if I didn't have the question of Brett Norfleet staying healthy, and also if they were more involved in the offense. And I mean, maybe that will be an element of Chip Lindsey's offense. It hasn't been for the last few years at Missouri, at least too much in the receiving game. But again, I have very little questions about tight end group. I have them at number 6. Killian, what do you have there?
I've got quarterback at 6. There's not a ton of experience from Simmons, and I think he's going to be pretty good. I just don't know. I like Zollers. Zollers probably won't play this year. I'd imagine they're going to do, Michael, like you mentioned, the red shirt thing. Evers is a fine backup. I think he's better than like Drew Pine was, for what that's worth. But yeah, Simmons is cool. I just haven't seen a lot from him. I think in the 5 groups I have above, there's at least one returner that I feel confident in being like a high-end productive guy. And while like, if I had to put a prediction on what I think Simmons is going to be, I would say, yeah, I think he's going to be good. I feel more confident in saying like Caden Lee is going to be good, or Caden Green is going to be good, or Ahmad Hardy is going to be good. I feel more confident in saying things like that than saying Austin Simmons is going to be really good. But overall, this is not like a bad 6. This is like a good 6. I've not got to the position groups yet where they are because I'm worried by them. This is like a strong 6 for me.
Yeah, I agree, Killian. I'm going to go with the offensive line at 6. I think if Caden Green, well, obviously if Caden Green wasn't in this group, it's a entirely different conversation, but I think he kind of carries them to this position for me. It seems like, we know that he's going to start, and we know that Judice is probably going to start at some sort of position, whether it's center or one of the guard spots. And that if Josh, we don't really know the timetable of injury for Josh Atkins yet, could miss the very beginning of the season, assuming he'll be there eventually. So that's 3 starters. Again, it's kind of a similar situation as last year, where you have maybe the interior, the guard spots that are kind of uncertain, and you have names there, and it's kind of the same names as last year. You've got Tristan Wilson, you've got Curtis Piegler, you've got Zach Owens, Luke Work, that are probably capable of or are capable of playing these spots, but you have question marks again, and maybe you give the nods. You give a nod to Piegler at one of the guard spots just because he had it last year, and maybe Tristan Wilson could do it. Maybe he plays center and Judice plays guard. So you have names there, but I don't want to say these guys have reached their potential and reached their ceiling. I think there's room for improvement with all of them. But if we're going off what we saw last year, I think there's a lot of room for growth. It's hard for me to put them any higher if we haven't seen that development yet, which is very possible. So if this was if we do this same exercise at the end of the season, I think it could be very easily that they're way higher, or I guess possibly lower. But I think middle ground for me is kind of the safe spot for the offensive line right now. Then depth wise too, like I kind of just mentioned, you have names, you have some talented freshmen, Jack Lang, Johnny Jones, maybe Whit Hafer on the outside. Then you've got some talented freshmen on the inside too, and Logan Reichert too. We don't really know where he fits in. So you've got names, but there's still some uncertainty on the interior that kind of makes me hesitant to put them any higher.
All right, moving on to spot number 7. I have the edge rushers here. We've talked about the edge rushers a lot this offseason. It's a really interesting group. And this is definitely these last 4 spots were really a tough call for me, and I'm looking at them like right now and questioning all of it. But edge rusher for me right here is really carried by like the possibilities of the middle of the depth chart. I don't know that any of really those 5 transfer additions are going to be a huge starters this year. I'm pretty settled on it being Darius Smith and Langdon Kitchen as the starters there. But you have those 5 transfers. We talked about it 2 weeks ago. Really like what DeMarcus Johnson could be as a returner. Dayton Hopkins, I really like what he showed in his first year. Also really like CJ May as a potential guy down the line. So there's a ton of questions there for sure on both the top and the middle of the depth chart. But overall with that group, there's just a lot of solid to good players, I think, in the middle of the depth chart there. Killian, what do you have at 7?
I have cornerbacks, and I think I maybe should have had them lower as I'm saying it. But I really like Chris Graves. I don't really have, I think I'd be shocked if he's not like a pretty solid cornerback 1. I think we talked about last week how we kind of had him up there on our DPOY list. And then he's better than any of the corners on last year's roster. So that's a big thing. But after Graves, it's just like gigantic like question marks. Like, could Nick DeLoach like take on a bigger role like he did 2 years ago? Like that's an option. Cam Keys was pretty good, but in like very limited snaps last year. Jackson Gates could play. Jaleel Florence obviously has like some pretty crazy injury history. And then Laule looks like he could be a candidate for number 2. I don't know. I really like Chris Graves. the rest of the unit is kind of like what's going on. Like who's going to step up as the 2 and the 3. I think the cornerback 2 might be the hardest. Like that's not an easy position to predict who that's going to be. And then cornerback 3 as well. I don't think there's really a definitive answer yet. And that'll be interesting to see how it plays out throughout the offseason. So we'll see with that. But I really like Chris Graves. And I think that's the reason why I have cornerbacks not further down. Because before they got Chris Graves, it was probably the worst position group on the roster. Not to say that he's a savior or anything, but he is certainly the best among the bunch. And the rest is just going to be a lot of guys who haven't played in super prominent roles. And they're going to be asked to play pretty prominent roles next year. And that's a question mark. So I think that's why I have them on the lower half.
I think when I'm done talking, I might have to consider my list a little bit after your explanation. That was a good selling point. My number 7 is the tight ends. I just feel like I couldn't put them any lower because we don't have any questions. It's certainly not the most talented group on the team, but they're well-rounded. And the fact that you're returning 4 guys there and you add Isaac Jensen too, I feel like I don't have a single question. And again, like Brett Norfleet has to stay healthy. Jordan Harris needs to be a little more consistent catching the ball. Jude James probably still needs to keep bulking up. We don't really know what Gavin Hoffman brings to the table. So I guess there are questions, but not really as to what is this guy bringing to the table. We know all that already. So it's kind of like a safe position where you know what you're going to get for the most part. And if there's injuries, obviously Brett Norfleet getting hurt would take a lot off the top end there, but we saw more Jude James last year and Jordan Harris, and maybe we can start to see more Gavin Hoffman. So I just don't really have any, I guess, glaring questions or red flags about them. I think the continuity in that position group is safe enough for me to put them at 7.
All right, moving on to spot number 8. This is where I have the offensive line. I'm a little bit lower on them than both of you guys. I think I just have more questions really on the interior and for what both of you guys mentioned as, Josh Atkins injury. When can he come back? But I do think you all both made good points about the depth there on the interior, especially that I would be a little more higher on and didn't consider, but I have them at number 8. Killian, what do you have?
At 8, I've got edge. Like you said, I think the middle of the pack is really interesting. I think I like the depth there more than I do at the cornerback position. Like there's more guys that intrigue me as, these guys could be pretty good, whether it's like Kamara Morgan or CJ May or Malik Bryant or like DeMarcus Johnson, just because he's a freak athlete like that. I think some of those guys, like a couple of them are bound to be pretty solid contributors. Dayton Hopkins. And then I like Darius Smith as a starter. I do think he's like ready to be an SEC starter. I'm not sure who the other guy's going to be. And I think not having 2 guys on the edge that for sure will be like quality starters is a little worrisome, at least for me personally, just because of how important it is to have like quality pass rush from the edge. We'll see which of those guys ends up stepping up. But if none of them do, and you really only have one high quality edge rusher, that being Darius Smith, I'm not sure I have too much faith in the position being all that good.
Yeah, I actually also have the edges at 8, so I don't really need to explain too much more there. Darius Smith absolutely is ready to be a starter, but you have the question of kind of the lack of production and experience, so it might be a little bit of a learning curve for him. And then we obviously don't, like you said, know who the number 2 guy is. There's a lot of intrigue. I think when you talk about potential in a position group, there's a ton of that here. But I think when you compare it to the safeties, kind of like I was hyping them up a little bit earlier, you obviously have guys with potential, but they've also produced a little bit. Most of these guys with potential on the edge position haven't produced much. They also haven't really had the time to produce because they haven't played a lot. So I think it's a lot of athletic traits that you're looking at this position group, but they just haven't really put much together. You have Langdon Kitchen, who I think probably played a little bit more than we thought he would last year. He ended up being pretty solid, but he's arguably the most like athletically limited guy at the position group. So that might not be a guy you're super comfortable rolling out as the number 2 day one, even though he has the experience playing. So I think there's certainly some questions there on who's, again, is going to be the number 2. Kind of like you said, Killian, that picking the second corner might be one of the hardest things to predict. I think you could put this position up there as well because there's so many names with potential, not a lot of production. You don't really know who's going to be able to slot in right away there. So I think intrigue-wise, it's at the top of the position groups, but question mark-wise, it's high up there as well. So I'm excited about this position group. Not that obviously didn't really factor into my rankings at all. I'm really excited to see who comes out on top here, but there's just not enough at all to put them any higher than this, in my opinion.
It was like a couple weeks ago, I tried predicting a depth chart on the Google Doc just for fun, and on it was like Darius Smith the end, and then at the other end it was like Kamara Morgan / Langdon Kitchen / CJ May / Malik Bryan. I was like, I have no idea who it's going to be. I just no idea.
Absolutely. All right. Getting into the final 2 spots here. We're all going to have some combination of cornerback, defensive line, and tight end. If I've counted this up right. For me, at the 9th spot, I have the cornerbacks. You guys both hit on really well the questions there. At least Chris Graves Jr. is there. A lot of questions about Sione and his injury history. And it's not like there's, a lot of young reserves to kind of possibly lean on there. Killian, what do you have at 9?
I have defensive tackle at 9. Gracial and Marshall both played last year as rotational guys, but obviously one of the big things with Gracial is he's good when he plays, but how much can he actually play? And so if the big question surrounding a guy is, can he take a higher workload? And now it's it's time. McClellan is gone, Webb is gone. There's no more can he? It's you're going to, and you're either going to be good or bad. And so for the main question with that being with Gracial, his ability to play every down, or not every down, but play starter level snaps. We'll see. I think he's good. And then Jalen Marshall, I'm interested to see. I think Jalen Marshall's fine. It's a lot of guys who I think are just okay. I don't really think there's anyone in the unit who necessarily has a 2026 star ability and be a really standout guy. I just think there's a lot of guys you kind of know what you're going to get, and it's not going to be too great. But I also think it's maybe okay because I would rather my defensive tackle group be a little weak than maybe other groups. And then obviously as you go down the depth chart, it's just a lot of guys who haven't really played much, like Sam and Elias Williams. Obviously Elias coming off that injury that he'll be dealing with. And then Jason Dowell is kind of a fun athlete. Taj Overton, true freshman, I think he probably will play a little bit this year, just with kind of how the depth chart looks. So, and then Mark Hensley, who they got late in the portal, rotational guy. He probably won't play too much either, but it's a lot of guys who haven't played previously much at all. And if they have, it hasn't been very, very amazing. And they're going to be playing a lot more this year. I'm really, and I'm guessing that it's going to be Gracial and Marshall as the top 2 guys. And I just don't know how that's going to go.
Yeah, my number 9 was the corners. Again, I don't feel like I really need to elaborate on it too much. Chris Graves Jr. is awesome. Might be the best player, one of the best players in the will be one of the best players in the defense, might be the best when it's all said and done. But after that, it's just, you don't know who the second guy is. You don't even know who the third guy is. And I think that's just too much uncertainty to put him very high. Again, yeah, potential. I think I'm really curious to see where Nick DeLoach fits into this conversation. Obviously, he didn't play much last year, but the year before he was kind of splitting with Toriano Pride, I believe. So that might be a guy just based on experience in the system that we see rise to the occasion a little bit. Jaleel Florence is interesting, but we know the injuries. Sione Lalea, really intrigued by his size. He's certainly on the bigger end, but production necessarily isn't all there. And then you have Keys, who's been a special teams guy, and then Gates, obviously a talented true freshman. You're going to be asking a lot of someone to step up into that number 2 spot. I kind of want to give the nod to Deloach just because he's been around for a while, but the lack of playing time last season might have been kind of discouraging. But maybe he stuck around because he thought he was going to have. I mean, he certainly does have a good chance at going for that number 2 spot. So I don't know. It's pure speculation. It's going to be one of those position groups where in the fall there's going to be a lot of eyes on it. I wanted to put it higher just because of Graves. I think I kind of had that rationale for some other positions. So maybe my ranking system was kind of skewed, but I think the back end of the group just wasn't good enough for me to put him any higher.
All right, on to this last spot here. Number 10, I have the defensive line. Michael has the defensive line as well. For all the reasons you mentioned, Killian, I would say I'm a little more higher on Marquise Graciel than you are. But yeah, I mean, Jalen Marshall, there's questions on. And certainly, I mean, this position like safety where they've rotated quite a bit in the middle, I don't know if they have the same depth that they've had there the last 2 years. Anything to add there, Michael?
I'm really shocked that, I mean, obviously they made 2 portal additions with Donta Simpson and Mark Hensley. I'm surprised they didn't do more. And, obviously things fall through, and I'm sure I'm blanking on names that they went after and didn't land. I'm almost positive that happened, but the fact that wasn't more of a priority. I mean, maybe they really have a lot of faith in Marquise and Jalen Marshall and some of the younger guys with Dowell and Elias Williams. But from the outside, it's kind of hard not to be concerned just based on what we see on paper and what we saw last year. So I'm really surprised that they didn't go after anyone, with a higher profile, in their transfer portal class. I agree that Marquise is probably ready for a starting spot. If he's ready to play significant snaps, I'm not so sure, but he absolutely, you can feel comfortable about him as a number 1. I mean, at least you have to, based on what's on paper. But Marshall's probably safely the number 2, but that's not exactly the most thrilling thing just based on what he's been able to do the last couple of years. So I think it's definitely a position of concern, especially with the guys behind them just not being very proven whatsoever. It's, again, one of those things where multiple guys are really going to have to step up.
Yeah. Joe, do you have more on the D tackle?
No, I was going to welcome you for your tight end explanation.
Okay. Yeah. So I've got tight ends at 10. I don't think there's just much of anything in that unit. I think like the ceiling for that is like the group. The ceiling is the group being fine or average. Like Norfleet last year was like 13th in the SEC for like tight end receiving yards, and he ended the season. I know he was kind of like playing through injuries, but I feel like that's kind of a given with Norfleet at this point, where it's like he probably will have some sort of injury he plays through. And through the last 5 games, he had I think he had 42 yards, no touchdowns. Like, it was not a good conference play run for Norfleet after that Bama game. And then against South Carolina, he was fine. I know he was kind of playing through injuries for part of it, but I just think for a ceiling, you're getting a fine player there. And then Jordan Harris isn't going to go catch any passes. He'll be a good blocker, but he's not really going to be much of anything in the pass game. And then Jude James looked good with Matt Zollers last year, I guess. Maybe he'll look good with Simmons. I think he's athletic. I think he's fun. I don't know how much they're going to play him. I think the more you play Jude James, I think actually the more I probably like the unit, to be totally honest. And then, yeah, you guys are right with Hoffman. I think Jude James could give a little bit more burst maybe at some points, or at least a change of pace. But overall, I just don't think there's that many times where if I'm thinking about on offense what I want to do, and I'm calling plays, and I can run with Hardy, I can run with Roberts, I can pass to Alubade, I can pass to Lee, I can pass to Goody. I've got a lot of options I'd rather do before I'm let's go to the tight ends. And I just think they had a poor end of the season. I know you can say that with a lot of offenses, tight ends just aren't as heavily featured in general. But I just think it was a kind of a poor end to the season with the tight end group. And I'm not sure how much faith I have in some crazy turnaround for it.
I would definitely defend Brett Norfleet there. I mean, and maybe it's just a again, the idea of Brett Norfleet, but because I think he's going to be on NFL draft boards because of the idea of Brett Norfleet and because he's a 6'6", 263-pound tight end. Solely because of that. And I mean, probably has to get more than the over 250 yard mark for the first time in his career. He got 254 last year in order to really sustain that. But I mean, again, like his injury history is definitely something to question. He has to he can't be playing half the season injured like he has the past 2 years. But I mean, again, like that, I take your point in that really, the group hinges on that, because if you get past that, then you're really relying on Jude James to be a lot more of a receiver. I mean, I would say with James, again, last year, I see him as pretty early in his development, and still, I'd be interested to see if they are able to get him a little bit more involved in the backfield this year. I just think with his build, that's something where he could be really valuable. But I mean, yeah, I take your point too. Like it's not like they've been a real focus of the offense this last few years.
I think you guys had a reaction when I said it. I meant when I said more of Jude James, I don't mean start him over Brett Norfleet. Let me clarify that. I mean I would like if Jude James is playing a little bit more because he looked good in snaps last year. If he's playing a little more, I'd like that more for the unit. I'll clarify that.
Sure.
Yeah. I think it's also worth mentioning the up and down nature of the offense last year with the quarterback situation. I think should give Brett Norfleet a double asterisk on top of the injuries, because there was so much going on there, and it kind of Zoller's getting thrown in kind of for some reason featured Jude James more, and obviously Norfleet was hurt there for a minute, but but I think I don't want to say it's unfair to use that against him, because the injuries it's been every single year. So there's questions there, and it's kind of hard to be confident in the fact that he's going to be healthy for an entire season. But again, the idea of Brett Norfleet, if he's playing for a full season, I think I disagree with you, Killian, a little bit. I think he's arguably the most reliable, or maybe not the most reliable, one of the most reliable options you have if he's able to be there for the whole year. But I think that's kind of the question there.
At tight end or on the offense?
I mean, at tight end, but on offense in general, I think you know what you're getting with Brett Norfleet, and he's already proved himself to be productive and be consistent. So, and after the catch too, with his athleticism and size, I think that's a surefire option again if he's healthy. But I've also think we've seen his injuries, even like you guys have mentioned, when he's able to play, they've hindered kind of some of that athleticism. So kind of factors into that as well.
Well, and I also think I think we especially saw this in the 2024 season. He's a lot more valuable of a player if there's even the threat of him blocking. In 2024, especially with that shoulder, they were not using him a lot as a run blocker, and really, I mean, because he wasn't healthy enough to do so. And I don't have the exact data or proof for this, but I feel like the value of somebody with his size and athleticism, that mix would be the uncertainty of when he's on the field. Is he going to be out there as blocker, or are they going to be able to use him as a receiver? And so when he's not able to, when you're not worried about the threat of one of those, it takes away from that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and act like I think Brett Norfleet is a bad player or anything by any means. There's just a lot of worries. He just wasn't, I know the production to end last season just wasn't amazing. And through the injuries, if we're going to look at the cornerback position and be Jaleel Florence, the injury history, that's making him a question mark, or Josh Atkins injury. I think it's valid to bring up that could very well, I obviously hope it doesn't or anything of that nature, but it's valid to bring up if Norfleet has some sort of injury come up that either keeps him off the field, limits his receiving, or something with the shoulder where he can't block again, then that's okay. Jordan Harris and Jude James are your top blocking and top receiving tight ends. I'm just not sure how I feel about that. So if you're not getting Brett Norfleet at 100%, that position goes down a lot. And obviously you can say the same, if the best guy at any position goes down, then it's going to obviously make the position worse, but I feel like Norfleet has had a higher likelihood of not being at 100% capacity compared to some of those other guys.
I think that's the best way to view the tight ends. Honestly, I think having him higher than 10 is probably a little bit justified with Brett Norfleet. But if he's not there, which unfortunately is something that certainly could happen, then having them as the lowest one absolutely makes sense.
For sure. All right. To round this out, I've been doing some math throughout this of our composite rankings here. So at number one, we had running backs as a consensus. And you can see as we go along here, there's a lot more decimal points, so a lot more differentiation between us. But number one, consensus running back. Number two, linebacker. Number three, safety. Number four, wide receiver. We didn't have a consensus for the fifth spot, but you can move offensive line. Our composite ranking there was number 6. At 7, we have edge rushers at 7.5, tight end at 7.6. At 8, we have cornerbacks with 8.3. And then our consistent last spot is defensive line at 9.6. I think all of these, I mean, we all just went through it, but all of it makes sense. The math checks out and would be a list that I can get on board with. Any final thoughts there, guys?
No, I mean, I think the position groups at the bottom, obviously you have the most questions and maybe the most doubts, but also, like I mentioned with the defensive ends, maybe the most intrigue as well. So I think that's kind of the fun part of right now is speculating a little bit about who we think is going to start. I think for that reason, it makes the fall and then the very beginning of the season so crucial because some of these questions and red flags are pretty glaring.
Yeah, a lot of these are just kind of like taking shots in the dark on players who haven't previously played much before. So it'll be super interesting to like maybe look back at this like after the season's over and some of these positions are like totally out of whack from what we guessed. But yeah, it's really a lot of predicting. So the hard stuff that this is a hard list to make. I don't know about you guys. I was wishy-washy on it, but it was not super easy.
Yeah, for sure. So that's going to wrap up this episode of the All Things Mizzou podcast. Let us know in the comments if you vehemently disagree with our ranking here. But either way, appreciate you tuning in. Hope you do the same with the rest of our coverage over at Missouri Tigers on SI.